How do we support our students to know and tell their story? Hello, Ed family. Today we're talking about ethnographies and how that can be a vehicle to support our students to know and tell their story. You know, I love beginning with the why. Why is it important for students to know their story? Why is it important for students to tell their story? Why is it important for others to listen to their story with empathy and respect? And why is it important to do something good with your story? So where's your comfort level with doing a lesson on ethnography? Some of you may be a little bit uncomfortable and not sure what you want to try. You're at a 1, and that's okay. Just listen to this YouTube and think, is there anything that you might want to try? And then that might range to up to 5. Hey, next time, let's present together. Some of you might be doing some amazing work with ethnographies. I'd love to hear in the comments some of your successes and wins. You know, for myself, when I was young, I didn't really know my story or my history. I knew a little bit from my parents, but not as much as I wish I learned at that time. A question that I think young people are asking as they're growing up and even as they become older is the question, who am I? I'm pretty blessed that with my mom, can continue to meet with her very regularly, and I'll ask about different kinds of things and learn more about my story and my history. And I'm glad that I had a good relationship with my dad where I got to chance to hear a lot of different stories. But unfortunately, when I was a young man, he went home to be with the Lord, so I don't have the opportunity to ask him face to face a lot of the questions that I would love to know the answers for, because that would help me to know my story better, my story of resilience. You know, this past summer, I had a chance to take a look at the Korean American Ethnic Studies curriculum. And I began with my curiosity. There's a lot of like video links and lessons and lesson ideas in the ethnic studies model curriculum. And so I learned about Dosan An Chang-ho. I learned about Colonel Young-ok Kim. I learned about Dr. Sammy Lee. And that was maybe the first time that I was learning about Korean Americans who had made a difference for the United States of America. Now, if you were to ask me, can you name 3 prominent Asian Americans in our country's history? I might have been able to do that, you know, but if you were to have asked me, can you name 3 Korean American, I think before the summer, I would not have been able to do that. I didn't know my own history. And so as teachers, especially where I'm at, there's this real heavy emphasis on knowing our students by name, knowing our students by needs, knowing our students by their assets, stories, and their passions. But what if the students themselves don't know their stories, right? So this is a chance for students to get the opportunity to know about themselves, their history, and then to let that become a story of resilience. I'm actually currently working with a group of 10th graders doing an ethnography. I did an ethnography with my 7th graders last year, and it was such a powerful experience, which is why I'm continuing it this year. And basically, it's an opportunity for students to talk about their story. And I've talked about this in EdFamily about the My Story assignment as we create our history together. I've talked about the Photo Voice assignment, but what I haven't talked about is the ethnography assignment, which actually incorporates these 2 lessons as well. And so the driving question for my students is, how can I create a digital journal that tells my story? And so, you know, slide 1 begins with that my story, which we've already talked about. And slide 2 begins with, what does your name mean? So students go to their parents and have conversations around the story of how they were named. Slide 3, a family tree of at least 3 generations. Now, I know in my classes, I've had students where they were adopted. And so I told them, yes, include your family members that you are now adopted into, because that becomes now the new story of resilience for you, and encouraging them to do that. Slide 4, what would you say are some differences and similarities between your generation and your parents' generation? This might be the first time they've actually thought about that question. The photo voice slide for slide 5. Slide 6 is wonderful, an oral history with at least 1 person in their family. How many of you out of our EdFamily listeners have that, where you've had an opportunity to interview a family member. And I told you about my father who went home to be with the Lord. And I'm so glad I have at least a video of us having a conversation. I'm glad I have that. So I want our students to have that history, because sometimes when we don't record the history, it becomes lost forever. Slide 7, share the history of the people of your ethnic ancestry. So for example, for myself, what is the history of Korean Americans in the United States? A lot of young people don't know this, of their own ethnic group. Slide 9, story of how your family has made America a better place. So you can see this progression between knowing your story, telling your story, listening to one another's story with empathy and compassion, and then being able to do something good with your story. Slide 10, define how your culture adds value to America. Slide 11, how is being bicultural or multicultural a strength for you and your future? Slide 12, how do you plan to contribute and make America a better place? And these are great aspirational things for young people to think about, that not only are just goals, but they're building upon their story of resilience, their generational story, their migrational story, right? And so when I gave this assignment to 7th graders, I had a student actually just create like this Google slide template. She didn't create it for me, actually. She created it for herself to kind of have an idea of what to do for each slide. And I was like, oh, can I borrow that as a template? So now I'm using this as a template to share out with other students in case they need something to begin off of to create their ethnography. But I was so glad that my 7th grader could look at the instructions and then just create this template from scratch. I thought that was pretty powerful as well. All right. And then lastly, you know, I am a history teacher, but the great thing about an assignment like this is it offers the opportunity for cross-curricular collaboration. How wonderful would it be at the end of the year where a student is able to really tell their story, know their story, and tell their story well, and to have listened to many stories and to have done something good with their story. So at one of my sites, and I'll tell you, maybe there's going to be an ethnography part 2 down the line, we've had an opportunity to talk about my story of resilience, and many of us are on board to work together on this. So the English language department and the history department. So in history, we're writing into history, but in ELA, they're learning about history. So that's wonderful. We can collab on this. But the cool thing is even science and math are coming in on board, talking about the story that can be found in chemistry and math, and maybe looking at ethnic foods, even PE, as they're talking about a journey of resilience. So what will that look like at the end? I'm not even 100% sure, but I'm excited to begin the journey, and I'll keep you posted as we move forward. How wonderful is it that we are helping students to know their story, tell their story, listen to one another's stories with empathy and compassion, and do something good with their story. Do you think that's something we need in our community, in our schools, in our country? Yeah, I think so too. This is something great. So wanted to share this with you all. This is Dr. Kim signing out.